All right, I think we're going to get going, and as people join in, they'll get caught up to speed. So, good afternoon, everybody. Bob Bauer, I'm the president of AFI. Pleasure to be able to be with you virtually today. And today is a good example of how the help that members and those in the industry can get from our associate members. So Alba Wheels Up has been an associate member of AFI for many years. Some folks have spoken at our meetings before, done a webinar before, and it's a great example of how to leverage that communication interaction that you can have with them. So we're grateful to Alba Wheels Up for reaching out to us about this webinar today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping type details for you. The session's being recorded, so you'll be able to view it afterwards. And the slides will be available that way as well. And so if you give us a day or so after, we'll be ready to roll at that point with the recording. One other housekeeping detail, just want to make sure folks are aware of the AFI convention that's happening May 2nd to May 5th in Marrakesh, Morocco. Those have been around a long time. Remember the one in 1993, I think it was, or four. People are still talking about that one today. So it's going to be a great combination. Our focus is always on content. So the content of the speakers there is going to be excellent as well. Plus you have that added component of quite the destination. Please visit afius.org and take a look at the program and make a plan soon before the hotel fills up. So with that, now we'll get right into today's program. So it's on leveraging auto supply chain mapping tools for UFLPA adherence. And our speakers today are Philip DePlacy, he's Director of Business Development with Measure.io, and then Vince Acapella, Executive Vice President and Strategy, Growth and Strategy for Alba Wheels Up. And with that, I'm going to turn it right over to our esteemed speakers and let them take it from here.
Excellent. I think we got you on mute, Vince.
Thanks, everyone, Bob and AFI, for this opportunity to speak to you all about this issue and how it relates to food imports and sourcing and supply chain traceability, and really de-risking the supply chain for importers. Happy to be here. Turn it over to Philip.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Vince, and yes, Bob and AFI members, thank you very much for this opportunity. Looking forward to sharing what we're seeing in the marketplace and in technology, and look forward to being informative and answering all your questions.
So I guess I'll jump in here. Maybe we have folks in the audience that have different levels of information about the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. So it is a regulatory law that has been really in enforcement effect since June of 2022. And it mandates that Customs and Border Protection enforce the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And the goal of the law is to rid goods produced by forced labor from entering the global chain and specifically entering the commerce of the United States. It's the highest priority, one of the highest trade priorities, not just for trans-Pacific trade, but for all trade. If you see this, we'll talk about that later, how it's spreading to other regions and many verticals. So for importers, retailers, manufacturers, dependent on a compliant chain, this has been identified by the trade and many others, one of the biggest hurdles. Now in food, you have other agencies to deal with, like FDA and USDA, and all those regulations are still very important in getting the goods in. But this is a new layer that is not specific to food, but can does touch food products. So what's different about this? From most regulations, this is a rebuttable presumption, which is like a presumption you could argue, but it is a presumption that goods wholly produced or grown or mined from the Xinjiang region or from companies that are on the entity list of the UFLPA entity list are prohibited from U.S. importation. We encourage everybody to go to cbp.gov, and which gives online guidance to importers and the guidance documents about the law and what you have to do to adhere. So again, we want to just be really clear. This is a presumption of violative goods, and that's presuming that anything from this region is violative or anything on the list is violative. So I think, Philip, we can go to the next slide. This is from the dashboard, the customs.gov dashboard. And you will see here the value. This is FY fiscal year 23. You'll see the value of shipments detained, shipments denied, shipments released. You'll see the total value per year. And one of the things we want to drill down here is that it's not just a Uyghur region. It's pervasive. It's goods from China. The two countries that have more holds than China, Vietnam, Malaysia in some cases as well. And obviously this started with cotton, the cotton and apparel, and then it went to solar and microchips and other verticals. But now, we see it in food. There's some action on tomatoes and things like that. And we see it really forced labor issues and later on, Philip will talk a little bit about work they're doing with organic produce and things like that. But you see that there's forced labor issues in the Western Hemisphere now, and that food is included. So if we could go to the next slide. We talked about the prohibition. How does CBP enforce it? They identify, they detain, they exclude, they seize. You can re-export. This can be very, very costly. The importer must satisfy customs request for the information. It must adhere to the guidelines posted to get the goods released. And then there's two things here. The law requires that the importer work towards due diligence proactively, ongoing, in mapping the supply chain and knowing the parties down to the lowest tier, not just the seller, but all the way down to where it's produced or grown, to the raw material, the billable material. And you have to show due diligence if you get a hold. You have to supply a map of the supply chain with the parties and the risk assessment in the event that you want to rebut the hold. So Phil, we can go to the next one. I think we're close to turning it over to Philip for some of the tech stuff, but this is of note. You'll see on January 17th, the House Select Committee sent a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas for much more aggressive enforcement of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And that letter is posted publicly. It recommends that the companies on the list from the region be expanded. They talked about an urgent need to expand beyond the region and to expand the list. They talk about transshipment, that shipments that can be shipped over other countries that could be from that region. So now we're seeing things from Mexico being stopped, goods from Central America being stopped. The committee calls for more enforcement by Homeland Security on violative goods generally from China. And this includes materials that are shipped through other countries. So you might have an ingredient or an input from China that is in a product from another country. So, they're calling for increase in on-site inspections, more exams, more holds. So, I want to just tie it to commerce a bit. This is a supply chain disruption. When there's storage, there's demurrage for ocean, there's cost of re-exporting, there's a huge cost to canceling a purchase order on a retailer or a customer. And then there's brand risk to the brand, that they would, that they would have forced labor in the chain, and that the retailer might be exposed, or wherever your product is sold. So those are significant risks. And this tool helps, a very powerful tool to help de-risk that in the chain by, we'll see later how it does it, but making the prediction. And so we could go to the next slide. So, we'll drill down on this. The CBP requires, in the guidance document, they recommend a detailed mapping of the supply chain all the way to all tiers, not just the seller, not just tier 1. So you do need to go all the way down, all the relevant parties, all the relationships. It must include an assessment of the risk of forced labor in the chain, right? You have to do that. You have to incorporate this into your compliance program systemically at a high level, and you have to incorporate it in the event that you get a hold. Many companies have tried to do this manually and with their best efforts, and many U.S. importers are finding this process onerous, very difficult, expensive, time-consuming in this manual environment, and it might not even get the shipment released. So even after all that investment, the results of these manual processes are questionable, despite the best efforts. So we could go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Philip at this point, because he's going to talk a little bit more about how it works and how it makes the prediction. And then I'll jump back in when we get to the reporting and how to use it at a shipment level. And Philip and I will go back and forth.
As we do
during that. So go ahead, Philip.
We tag team a lot. Thank you very much, Vincent. It's a perfect setup, right? So really this regulatory pressure is affecting everyone. And at the same time, the world is becoming more chaotic. Data is all over the place. Most of the data in the world is what we would call unstructured data, right? It's not in nice, neat rows and columns. A lot of it exists on PDF documents and various things. And especially in the agricultural supply chain, you're dealing often with very unsophisticated, technology-wise partners in that supply chain, sometimes all the way down to smallholder, family-owned farms and that type of thing. In that context, modern tools are really coming to bear. There's been this hype around AI for a very long time. It's all been predominantly hype, but I can tell you in the last 6 months, we're starting to get as a civilization on the tipping point of what truly artificial intelligence means, right? The ability of artificial intelligence, especially the way we leverage them, which is this agent-based model, is becoming incredibly more sophisticated and much more helpful. Tasks that normal human analysts were doing in the past and working on, and manual work, it can now be offloaded to these agents, and we call them AI agents. Not to come up with any like Hollywood thoughts that you might have in your head, but agents, because these software programs have agency. They literally can make their own decisions. They understand large text, blocks of text, and in any language. They can reason, and it's this ability to reason and set, and when you set them targets for them to try and solve problems, that truly starts to step into the realm of what artificial intelligence is all about. So, what we're seeing is that these agents now are starting to perform these tasks, performing tasks that would normally have been delegated to a human analyst, someone in the supply chain, to go and collect all the documentation, read all these PDF forms, find the PO numbers and the various parties, look at the has the phyto certificate been properly processed? Where's the document for the USDA? Where are all these pieces of paper that need to go into this process during the import for example, of food from overseas. Yeah, that's all now possible with this ability of AI agents to essentially take that unstructured documentation, understand what is there, understand what's missing, fill in the blanks, and deliver. And what we're seeing is if you have a team of analysts, you know, and you look at this being an approximation of a bell curve of human performance. You've got some really good analysts over here. You've got your average analysts in the middle, and you've got your poor analysts over there. With the AI agent, what it's essentially doing is it's doing all the hard, heavy grunt work lifting of processing this document and these documents, extracting information, checking these legal entities, these companies, and that against lists and all that type of stuff. And it can do it at a much faster pace and at a much higher accuracy. And so this essentially enables your analysts to be far more effective. The other thing, of course, AI never sleeps. It's always on itself. It's autonomous. It's constantly thinking about it, and it scales across different types of data types and different languages and that. So, you know, Vince and I, we just processed for a customer several gigabytes of handwritten Mandarin documents. I mean, that's just not possible in the past, right? In a reasonable amount of time. So what we're seeing is that there's all these different data sources. So you've got open source intelligence, or what we would just call open data, right? Data that's found on the open internet, information about companies, press releases, they're opening in, you know, new areas, even things that are related to growing conditions in certain areas related to crops and that type of thing, droughts and all that type of stuff. Then we have licensed data. In the licensed data part, we are looking at various agronomic models and growing conditions of crops in different parts of the world. We're also picking up trade information and trade signals between countries. Even countries from China, still some of those containers still need to go through the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, right? So that if you know where to find the signals and where you can find that data, you can start to understand what's going on. And then we also have information that's proprietary information. And I know in the agricultural food chain, you know, supply chain, that it's been tough. Some folks, you know, farmers are reluctant to share their data. We've been doing work on aflatoxin and all that type of stuff, but you can trace some of that stuff right back to the growing conditions on the field. So this idea of being able to track and trace food products right from the beginning, from their source, how those agricultural products refrigerated, how were they grown, how were they harvested, how were they handled in the packaging plants, how were they, you know, were they refrigerated, all that type of stuff all comes into making that final piece of attestation to the FDA or the USDA or to customs broker so much better when it's all taken into account by the AI agents. So yeah, I mean, a couple of key things that you should think about when you're looking at technologies like this. The one thing is there is a lot of tools out there, but when it comes to being able to have to present something to CBP, as Vince pointed out, right? There's this presumption of guilt, but there's this rebuttal opportunity. And how do you put your package of documents together? How are you going to rebut this, right? Are you able to provide CBP or your attorneys or whoever's helping you, your customs broker, with actual data lineage? Can you go back to the source document, not just some, you know, maybe relationship type thing, but can you prove that those avocados were grown on that farm in Mexico or wherever? The other part of it is, we'll talk a little bit about this later, around privacy. Companies, this is a very competitive space. Everyone is competing and all that type of stuff for market share and knowing suppliers and who those suppliers are. When you build out these supply chain graphs and you start to see who the partners are, it's very important that you guys on this call understand how machine learning works and how to protect your own privacy. There's this idea that you can train models from everyone's data and that there's no data leakage, and that doesn't give competitive information away. And I would challenge that. We don't believe that, and we use what we call unfederated data for our training. We talked a little bit about the data sources, but everything from satellite images, open source intelligence, press releases, court cases. The example that Vince kind of alluded to was catching a coffee maker that was using a banned substance to do the decaffeination of the coffee with their USDA organic label, and then selling it to a big brand in the United States. So that kind of open source intelligence is what we find. And then again, early warning, early detection, right from the beginning of understanding weather patterns and understanding disruptions and all that type of stuff, and growing conditions right through the supply chain. All this now is for the first time, we now can start to look at this whole picture and develop some predictions around that. And then, at the end of the day, and Vince is going to talk about this in a little while, but if this data isn't actionable, if there isn't a way for you to be able to walk into your boardroom or to your boss and say, this is the problem I have, this is a place in the supply chain that I'm having this problem, then this data is not actionable. You can't make any decisions off it. And so these output reports and what you get for it is very important. So I kind of covered this already. I probably should have flicked the slide, but again, just remember, make sure you can trace your data right back to source documents. Remember how to understand what data privacy means. Really looking at diverse sources is an opportunity now in the future going forward. And again, this is not possible with humans doing this kind of work, and so on. So that's really it. It's if we can do this, we're starting to do this now with Vincent and Alba at the shipment level, right? So at every single product coming in at the product level, knowing that particular shipment, not just shipments in general and which companies do business with each other in general, but at the shipment level. So Vince, I'm going to hand it off to you. This is the famous Alba report, but
yeah, this is the part that gets us fired up at Alba. Thank you, Philip. And so we partnered with Measure and Philip's team, and we really learned from our customers, like what did they want, what did they need. When Customs and Border Protection did a technical expo in the first quarter of this year. And they talked about leveraging these supply chain tools for transparency, UFLPA and other issues, mostly UFLPA. And I think the feedback we got from a lot of folks was that, hey, you know what? I get how I see the technology, I see how it works. Like, what do I do with it in my environment? Like Philip alluded to that. Like, what do I do with it in my environment? Like I need to go into a boardroom. I need to go to my risk manager. I want to go to my trade attorney and my customs attorney. And so, and also, before we get into the report, if you go over the guidance documents on cbp.gov, it talks about due diligence and it talks about mapping the parties in your chain. But then in the event of a hold, it talks about mapping the parties in that shipment and what the relationships are, what the UFLPA risk is. Go all the way down the chain, every tier to the produce or production, manufacturing, growing, or mining, right? So all the way down the chain, all the parties, and this is a shipment-based report. To Philip's point, that is based on a shipment, and the reason why that's important is because it shows you what the score is for that shipment. Right? It's not a general score. It's not a score based on a whole bunch of data. It's based on the data and the parties in that particular shipment. You'll see a bill of lading number up there that ties this report to a shipment that moved on a container in a ship. Right? So it's really targeted to that. Let's talk about the score. I think Philip likes to say it's like a credit score, and it's true. So 0 being a very terrible score, and 1,000 being the best score, and each of those, the most extreme. And this is a prediction, right? So you're never going to get a 0 or 1,000, but the prediction is based on a benchmark that industry set, different industries set, and your company sets. So generally, I think in the middle of 23 or early 23, you heard a lot about this benchmark being 80 out of 100, 800 out of 1,000. And, you know, we got a lot of questions in the beginning, like, and that's 800 being an 80% probability that the shipment is de-risked from forced labor, right? And some people come back and say, well, what if I get a 7, most of the attorneys, for good reason, what if I get a 790? What if I get a 780, right? Well, if you're benchmarking, that's not a bad score. I mean, that's close to 800. If you're getting a 200 on the same supplier, many shipments in a row, you know, it directs you, you pretty much know you probably have an issue that you need to look into for sure. What's also unique about the report is there's a box that tells you why you're scoring that way. And in the example that Philip has up, you'll see that it tells you why it's scoring well or not, and based on all the risk factors that Philip explained. And then there's a second a page behind this report that actually shows a map and a summary of that. So you know, that's pretty simple to use. Now, full disclosure, I'm going to anticipate some questions. This is not a guarantee; it's a prediction. A very powerful prediction based on a very powerful tool. And we recommend that this kind of flows up into your compliance program so that you use this as a tool and that goes up into your compliance program so that your team internally can assess the risk.
Excellent. Thank you, Vince. Yeah, I thought you were gonna forget the team part, but that's a very important thing, right? Is how do you improve? It's not like shooting in the dark. Your compliance teams have a hard enough job right now, and if you focus them everywhere, it's hard. But with these reports, you get the actual information that's driving your score down. You can go and address those issues, and then systematically increase your compliance in those areas, and overall increase your compliance. So it's really a risk-based approach to really finding out where the problems are. You know, could have probably for the food guys maybe chosen a different slide here, but we do a lot of satellite imagery. Here are some forced labor camps, for example, but we also monitoring, you know, the rainforest. We're monitoring all the different main agricultural areas in the world with a satellite imaging. We work with the National Predictive Model Tool Initiative, NPMTI. It's a USDA you know, funded organization. So we're literally helping farmers and growers detect disease pressure, understand what those things are. With those models, we now can tune them to start looking at what's happening in the fields. Can we identify different crops? Can we make some assertions as to this much wheat or this much corn or this much tomato should be coming out of this hectares in this area in China? Does that make sense? How these tomatoes getting onto the market and that type of thing. So that's just one element. Here is another element. I'm not going to focus too much on it because it's about PVC, but the main point is this: you are now responsible as an importer for everyone in the supply chain, even the people you don't even know and who you have no contracts with, right? This is the problem with this regulation. So how do you look at that in depth? How do you know that, you know, in this case, you got a guy, a company in Xinjiang that's related to another company, and then on their, you know, on their financial reporting, on, you know, the 300-page Mandarin document, they happen to mention this one company in Vietnam. And our US companies basically buying PVC flooring from them, right? And they think they're clean. They're doing work with a company in Vietnam, but don't realize that there's this full problem standing behind them. Then, as it comes to the actual import of goods into the US, you're all probably familiar with the ACE system that CBP uses as a kind of a main clearinghouse of all these documents. Our company is actively involved in building the new system, right? And it all comes back down to traceability. So you've got your you know, your PGAs, your partner, your organizations down here. You've got all the different parts. And again, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but every component now will be all these traceability documents, everything. We're going to be going away from EDI. We're going to be going away from fax machines. And this is the direction that CBP is going. Our system is already has this embedded, and many large retailers like Walmart and that are actively testing this work with us, with CBP, around how do we do FSMA 204 and traceability and all that type of stuff. So,
I'm gonna stay on this if you can. So when I was on the COAC advisory committee for customs, one of the things that happened in our term was ACE 2.0, the deployment, phased adoption of the deployment, and it created a single window for all these agencies to collect this data, make risk assessment, do cargo release. So what Philip is showing you here is really, you have APHIS, USDA, FDA, and things that may not affect food like EPA, 49 government agencies. I think about 8 or, my data might be 5 years old in my brain, but about 49 government agencies that regulate imports. Maybe 5 to 8 really have cargo hold authority. So this is an important map if you're in food, because you all have so many agencies that oversee the imports of these goods. And to have a system that is de-risking the supply chain from the folks who are helping with this, like Measure, and aligning the de-risking tool to the data sets and the process on the government side, is really, really powerful. So I just turn it back over to Philip.
Absolutely. And I'm not here to sell anything. Vince is coming to sell, is selling, but I also want to invite you, any members of AFI who want to participate in this. It's completely free as an observer or an active participant to get on the inside track, to do tech demos with CBP, get your IT department involved in, can we start adopting some of these standards? What is it going to mean for us down the road? Our team will be happy to guide you through that. That's part of our contract with CBP and the Silicon Valley Innovation Program to literally encourage industry to participate in these programs. So that that the government's not the only one, but the only customer of this stuff, right? These are open standards. These will become pervasive standards in the future, and the only way those things succeed is with adoption. So to kind of summarize, you got these ideas around total privacy. This is a very important point. We'll knock down a slide or two in a second just around like why it's important to protect your privacy. But machine learning is going to, if we think we've already given up too much of our own personal privacy, wait till we have artificial intelligence doing some of this work. And as companies, this is a whole new ball game, right? I can't believe how many companies are allowing people to use ChatGPT and stuff right from their office, asking business questions, right? That's the data leakage right there. Legal record. Let's make sure that when you are ready or are expected to present data to the government, to CBP, to release a hold or whatever, that you have all your ducks in a row, you got complete data lineage from of every party, and your package is well assembled and ready to roll. Time and place. This is important. It's not all about documents, right? That's why we use a satellite imagery. It's very important to ground truth all this stuff when it comes to documentation and digital information. So is this farm really there at that longitude and latitude? Can I take a picture of it from a satellite to prove that that is actually an avocado farm or blueberry farm or whatever, right? Is this actually how these places exist in the real world? And then of course this shipment report that Vince said is the cherry on the top. This is how you move the needle. This is how you have conversations with your organization. This is how compliance teams can essentially start focusing on what's the most important thing and use a probability score to kind of improve and go from there. And the savings are there. I don't know, Vince, if you just want to run down them, you probably got a better feel for the business use case.
Yeah, but the screen of our faces covering that, but I think I know it well enough by now. So, tremendous. It's worth noting that this is based on a real ESG problem that involves human beings. So we don't want to downplay that. But what it's really become also is a supply chain disruption issue, right? And what does that look like for your business? What does that look like for your risk? What does that look like for your customer retention and your ability to get product to the people that are buying them? Whether you're going direct to consumer, whether you're going business to business to distributors, if you can't get that product to them, you can't sell it. But even worse, what about the trust they have in your ability to get that product to them, right? If you're not reliable. So you have the very, very basic cost, like, do I have storage? Do I have dwell? Do I have demurrage, right? And then you have, after that, do I need to re-export, right? Which is costly. And so I've heard some say, we're learning as we go, right? And now we're seeing customers that have holds, they're real holds. So we're learning as we go. Well, if I re-export it, out of sight, out of mind, somebody is paying to store that at origin now. Somebody is nothing free, right? And nothing is for free. And so now it's at origin, and maybe it's resold somewhere else. So you got the basic US cost that you get right away, and then you have cost to re-export. And then what's the cost of a canceled purchase order? Not only, like I said, not to be repetitive, but not only the cost of the goods, but the reputational cost, the brand cost, and then the external market brand cost. When somebody goes to pull something off a shelf and takes a picture of it and posts it on social media and says this was, the supplier of this was on the entity list, right? So those are where do you, this
that
is
happened recently, right? I mean, a
right.
big
Go ahead,
user that helps, puts food in the government buildings and is a caterer. Ultimately was dealing with a company where the Uyghur folks are on on these ships doing fishing and don't see land for like 3 years, right? I mean, these are serious allegations.
real stuff. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about privacy, right? Data is out there, and it's important to realize that as these tools become better and better at sucking up information, you need to take a harder and more nuanced kind of approach on essentially making sure that your data remains your data, and any insights or models driven from your data should be your intellectual property too. Data is everywhere. Dark web has a lot of company leaked data from breaches and all that type of stuff. Social media, you can't believe what people say about their companies and other companies and that online that we pick up as signals and all that type of stuff. And I like this little joke here. You got this guy sitting at this table here, and he says he's typing in "Long live the revolution." Our next meeting will be at. And the predictive text says the date and time of the meeting, right? And he's like, I got them, right? So that's how we leak data sometimes, right? So when we train predictive models on input from other users, it can leak information in unintended ways. So again, just bear that in mind. Look for firms that treat your data the way you would treat them when it comes to selecting technology products in this new space. And with that, Vince and I will be here for questions.
Yes, if anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and fire away.
Or they can also add them to the chat, either way, if they don't speak. I know that sometimes it can be.
I was wondering, I found that slide up front to be pretty interesting in terms of the ones that were rejected and the ones that were okay. It was almost half and half.
Yep.
But I'm wondering if the ones that didn't make it in, if you have any thoughts on how many were actually okay, they just couldn't prove it.
I'll take that one. I probably couldn't answer that. And then also remember that the ones that were released might have been released after a long period of time,
Yeah.
right? So you may have had, probably were released after a long period of time. So you may have had charges,
Mhm.
storage, and delays to delivery anyway. So
Sounds too like there's a CTPAT kind of component in here too. If I'm in CTPAT, I don't think this is required or mapping from what I'm hearing. I think it's becoming more a component of it. But it seems
so
like
I'll take that one too. We are getting requests from, we are talking to importers that are talking about how the mapping of the chain rolls into the CTPAT data or process elements. So they are definitely connected. CTPAT is a trade partnership program originally to de-risk for anti-terrorism, and now has other components in it as well. So yes, mapping of the chain is absolutely essential.
one question we always get whenever a government agency is involved, from where you two are sitting, does it seem like things are being handled in a similar way across the board?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one too. So yeah, I think Customs and Border Protection, and I'm not talking about the other agencies, but Customs and Border Protection, they have moved much of this analysis to the Centers of Excellence and Expertise, the CEEs, and those are commodity based. Those are based on machine or apparel, or foods. So these risks are being assessed by those teams in Customs. I think there is more uniformity. Maybe on what's being asked, depending on the risk they see, might have some divergence. But I encourage everybody to go to cbp.gov, look at the guidance document to importers, and it gives you examples of the types of information CBP would request in the event to mitigate or rebut the hold. And that's it's pretty detailed and laid out what the importer needs to do.
And I got a question here there from Gerardo, which is a good question that I'll take. His question is, and it's in the chat if everyone wants to read it, but are you sharing data between customers either in a federated and or anonymous fashion? And this just comes back to that data privacy thing. Both of those are insufficient, right? Federated data means you're training the machine learning models on other people's data, and then you're taking that trained model and you're using it in a specific use case. The problem is the legacy that the data that model was trained on is still there, and that's how things can leak. Anonymous data just means essentially that you're then taking data that you're then changing the names on the people, on the legal entities and the relationships and all that type of stuff. And again, with machine learning has become so sophisticated that anonymization data always finds a way to leak data. So what you're really looking for is privacy preserving methods of training data which don't have anything to do with sharing any data with any customers. The customer data must be kept completely separate, and that's the answer to that question.
I see another question popping up as well.
Go ahead.
All righty. So again, can you use the tool to mitigate any CBP hold or to help with supply chain mapping requests by CBP in the event of hold? So this thing is evolving, right? Philip and I and our teams have customers that are using it in maybe what it wasn't intended for 8 months ago, but extremely powerful results and use cases. So I have a hold, and let's stick to UFLPA right now. The question talks about other holds. Let's stick to UFLPA. So I have a hold, and a customs attorney, trade attorney may want to know what the risk is on those documents. prior to so that they can, not to evade, to find where the problem is, right? Like to find where the problem and then fix it. And also they might want to organize the compliant documents with a summary of those documents, right? That they can use. So instead of dumping boxes of documents at customs and saying, go through these 16 gigabytes of documents manually, there's a summary of the document scrub, right? And that's, we find some importers are getting a lot of value with that to help with the holds. And Philip could talk about what some of those look like. They might be in different languages, right, Philip? Maybe you want to talk a little bit about, how that buckets out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, documents, again, the opportunity that we have here is that because of the new technologies, we can now read very unsophisticated data sources, which include literally PDF documents. I apologize for my puppy barking in the background here, but basically that, yeah, I mean, everything from handwritten documents and other types of documents can be all read, assembled, legal entities extracted, relationships found between these legal entities. And just one of the things that, Vince, that's required in the rebuttal is to identify the role of each party in the supply chain. Well, if you're a grower or you're you're in the packaging or whatever, like everyone needs to say, I'm a packager. Now, when you get a PO or an invoice or whatever from a company, and we're using these documents to build these relationships out, they don't automatically say, well, I'm a packager today. They don't necessarily define their role. So, but this information can be inferred from knowledge of the supply chain and all that. And this is the power that we're talking about here, that this can be done automatically. No longer, I mean, I'm literally talking to some customers who have got an army of people and they're highlighting documents by hand with a highlighter to try and find all the connections. And this is not sustainable to do it manually anymore.
Yeah, I just want to add that some customers find it so effective that they might be scrubbing all their documents preemptively and proactively, not waiting for the hold, right? And then using the summary so that you can assess the risk and quickly based on the document scrub. So it's very powerful and it's been very, very effective.
Cool. Very good. Any more questions from the great audience we have here?
All right, seems like we are done with questions. And obviously, if somebody has, they can continue to either butt in or throw it in the chat. But in the meantime, I'll begin to thank Vince and Philip for their time with us today and their expertise. And
if I can just, Bob, if I could just remind folks that I did make that open invitation. Maybe they reach out to you if they're interested in doing the demo and observing the process or being a participant in the new document flow for ACE 2.0. If they want to reach out to you, maybe you can get through Vince to and we can help them out.
Please reach out and on that interest. And even if this is recorded, Bob, and on some of the records, we can always be available as well.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, like you said, it is recorded, so those listening after the fact, you've heard that, so feel free to reach out as well. So, all right. Well, with that, I guess we can wrap it up. Philip and Vince, thank you again.
Thank you.
And wish everybody a good weekend, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the time and the opportunity.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.